Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of Sacred Heart Province and the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. On this 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time, we hear a very familiar story from the Gospel of Luke. As Jesus continued his journey to Jerusalem, he traveled through Samaria and Galilee. As he was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. They stood at a distance from him and raised their voices, saying, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." And when he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." As they were going, they were cleansed. And one of them, realizing he had been healed, returned, glorifying God in a loud voice. And he fell at the feet of Jesus and thanked him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus said in reply, 10 were cleansed, were they not? Where are the other 9? Has none but this foreigner returned to give thanks to God? Then he said to him, "Stand up and go. Your faith has saved you." All too often, when we hear this particular story, we focus our attention on the 9 so-called ungrateful men who were cleansed of leprosy. But were they really ungrateful? Or were they rather bound by an obligation that they simply could not afford to skip? For you see, when a leper was cleansed, in order to rejoin society, in order to rejoin his family, in order to be able to worship in the synagogue or in the temple, in order to be able to engage in ordinary commerce, he had to be declared clean by the priests of the temple. If that did not happen, they were still ostracized, even though they were cleansed of their leprosy. This was part of the law. And as the Pharisees would tell you in a minute, if you keep the law, then you will be saved. But that's not Jesus' message. That hasn't been Jesus' message throughout the gospel. Jesus does not teach us that we are saved by the law. In fact, just the opposite is true. Jesus usually tells those people who are cured, those people who are healed, that their faith has saved them. And that's exactly what he does to the Samaritan. Now, the Samaritan knew that he couldn't go to the temple, he couldn't go to the priests, he couldn't go there to be declared clean. He would not be welcome because he was not a Jew. He was a Samaritan. Interestingly enough, while these 10 men were lepers, the Samaritan was welcome among them. But now that they are cleansed, they no longer need that 10th man. And let us again remember that in order to pray, a Jew needs a minyan, 10 righteous men. So while they were lepers, they welcomed the Samaritan. But now that they have been cleansed, he isn't needed anymore. They go to present themselves to the priests because they want to rejoin their families. They want to rejoin the Jewish community from which they have been ostracized by their leprosy. But the Samaritan comes back to Jesus. And in fact, he does what the other 9 failed to do. He gives thanks to God for having been cleansed. Now, the gospel is very clear. Jesus was not present when they were cleansed. They were on their way to the priests when they realized that they had been healed. And here we have to pay attention to the fact that the Samaritan, who couldn't go to the temple to thank God, comes to Jesus and does him homage, worships him because he realizes that here is his God. And it is in that context then that Jesus tells the leper, "Your faith has saved you." St. Luke very craftily puts this story on the boundary between Samaria and Jerusalem. He's on the margin. He's on that part of Israel which is between. That's another very important point here. Jesus is inviting us to do away with those boundaries, to do away with those barriers. He is inviting us to forget about the barrier that the law presents to us and to embrace our faith, which makes it possible for us to live with one another in peace. For more information about CUSA, please visit our website at www.cuson.org or visit us on Facebook.